and indeed to our Portuguese friends as well, who are in the fortunate position of being in Portugal, where I would like to be right now, but it can't be done. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is, I'm going to walk through a number of slides with you, covering out a couple of different areas around developing the business from a financial perspective and developing the team then around the soft skills. So what I'll do is I'll share that slide deck with you and I'll make my way through it. And we will finish in time to allow a Q&A. But also, as we're going through it, if anything occurs to you in relation to any given topic or any given element, just pop something into the chat if you wish to. There's no problem whatsoever in doing that as I'm walking through the presentation. And I'll either deal with it there and then, or we've gathered them in at the end. But we will allow some time at the end for that Q&A, as I said. So just bear with me while we call up the slide deck for the moment. Okay, so I hope everybody has line of sight on that. You might let me know that you can see it okay, all good? Yeah. Okay, so again, welcome. Bom dia and bem-vindo for our Portuguese colleagues. I'm not going to try anything too dramatic in Portuguese beyond that. I am trying to learn the language, but it's proving a challenge is all I can say, but we'll stay with it. We'll stay with it. So as I said, in terms of content, I want to look at developing your business, and that's from a financial perspective. My background is financial services. I had a long career in banking that I left about 7 years ago, and I now work as an executive coach and a trainer and a lecturer. So my principal background is in financial services, and therefore when we talk about developing your business, which has many aspects to it, this morning I'm going to focus on the money side and on the people side. And within the money side, we'll talk about what financial options are available to you and are open to you as you try to develop and grow an SME. And then separate to that, we look at what's involved in developing your people. And what we'll walk through there is an audit of skill sets within your company as it stands, how you actually do that. And we'll do all this quite quickly. And then we'll have a quick dip into some of the soft skills around facilitation skills, influencing skills, a little conversation around assertiveness skills, and then wrapping up with something around negotiation. So we're going to try and get through all that between now and about 9:45 to 10 to allow for the Q&A. Okay, so let's kick off then. In terms of developing your business and financial options, every developing business needs access to capital. We all know that. It usually takes the form of some combination of the three available options between equity, debt, and grants. And I just want to break those down briefly for you. You'll be familiar with this, I'm sure, but just in terms of trying to cover it out, equity obviously is the capital invested by the business owners or indeed external investors into your business. And it's fair to say, particularly from a banking perspective, that the quantum of equity will often influence what can happen with the other two elements of available financing, i.e. debt and grants. In other words, and the next point being it's important to recognize that no lender or bank will want to take a position in your business that puts them in a scenario where they have more skin in the game than the owners. So the level of equity that goes in from the owner is important in determining what happens around debt and grants. And of course, worth saying around grants, that they are offered by state agencies, and I know in Ireland I'm very familiar with what we have, but I know in Portugal you also have state agency support in helping businesses to get up and running and indeed to develop. But it's fair to say that that money is not free money. It does require a solid business rationale to justify the investment. Now, very quickly, just to talk about engaging with the bank, because it's constantly, I think, a challenge for SMEs in particular, where they don't have lots of resources, financial or human, and it does take effort and it does take time. And the bank, of course, if you're trying to develop your business, you're trying to start it or indeed grow it, they will want to see a business plan from you. But I think it's quite important to say that more importantly, you need to have that business plan for yourself. From my banking days, people would say, well, why do you need to see the business plan? I think you need to see it before I need to see it as a banker. So you need to have committed your thoughts to paper And you need to be able to challenge yourself on the feasibility of that development plan before you bring it anywhere. So you need to be comfortable that it stands up. You need to be comfortable that it makes sense. And of course, that business plan can range from something that's extremely comprehensive to something that's more simple, depending on the scale of the business. But whatever the business scale might be, ideally the plan will need to talk about the what, where, when, why, and how, the various elements of what you're intending to do or are already doing. And I think it's probably fair to say in relation to that final bottom comment, if you can't make a credible case to a bank as to why you believe you can run or grow a business successfully, why would that bank lend you money? So while it involves time and effort, it's really important that you get comfortable around the approach you're trying to take, why you think it makes sense, and being able to credibly present that to a third party in the shape of a bank or indeed a state agency. And let's have a quick look at what banks expect to see in the business plan. The exec summary, obviously, which is exactly what it says. It's a summary of the overall business proposition, covering the main elements of the plan. The bank will want to understand the description of the company, who's involved, who are the shareholders, who are the owners, who are the external investors, what's the legal status of the company, and so forth. The market analysis, very important as well. SWOT, you're probably familiar with the concept of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And very often, again, depending on the scale of the business, you may be including a PESTEL analysis or some level of a PESTEL analysis. And what the PESTEL stands for is political, environmental, social, technological, legal, and economic. Now, you may not cover out all 6 of those legs, but you may want to cover out some. So in particular, what's the economic position in relation to the company? What's the technological situation? And more in today's environment, what's the environmental position? So if you are doing something by way of production or manufacturing or whatever it might be, is there an environmental impact? And these are things you need to be conscious of. Obviously, marketing and sales, identifying what customer trends and opportunities are you seeing? Where are you seeing the market forward? What's your pricing strategy? And what's your customer delivery strategy? The key people in the organization, the bank will need to understand who that is in the shape of your organization chart, and how vital they are to the ongoing development of the business. R&D and business assets, obviously what's happening there, what does the company look like from that perspective? And of course, and it goes without saying, your financial forecasting. What are we forecasting going forward? What assumptions are we making? What funding requirements are we identifying? And of course, then any additional information you may want to put in by way of an appendix. But that's a relatively quick run through a business plan, but those aspects will need to be covered within that plan. Now, the other thing worth talking about is the bank and their appetite for risk, because again, when people approach a bank and they're looking for debt from them, they're often, I think, a little surprised that the bank might not be perhaps as amenable or even more amenable than they were hoping they would be. And it's important to understand that a bank's appetite for risk will be determined by its credit policy and exactly how much appetite it has as an organization for risk. And the way the bank views the world would be between an existing client or a new client. And if you're an existing client of a bank and you are looking for additional debt for your current business or to extend into a related business, that may be viewed as a low risk because they already have a profile on you. They can already see how the existing business is performing. If you're an existing customer looking to extend or expand into an unrelated business, in other words, you've got business A and you now want to set up or extend into business B, which is a different business, that will be viewed as a medium risk. Because again, they know what you're like, they know how you're doing on the current business, but there's a higher risk involved if you're getting involved in a new business. And then of course, if you come in as a brand new customer, but you're bringing an existing or related business with you as a new customer, that's a medium risk. If you're coming in as a new customer and you want to establish an unrelated business, that's a high risk. And you can see then when we get to very high. If you're a new business, a first-time customer, that's deemed by the bank to be very high risk. unfortunately, for the very reason that a lot of business startups just don't make it. And from a banking perspective, they will view the risk involved in the context of lending to a startup as being high risk. And of course, the key thing from the banking perspective is they won't lend to any business without first being able to establish what the repayment capacity of that business is. Yeah, sometimes, I'm just going to come off this for a second so I can make this point. Sometimes people are a bit surprised, but retail banks are not in the risk business. People sometimes get a bit taken aback by that statement, but they're not. They're in the business of lending in a risk-averse way and in a conservative fashion, in a way that's designed to make sure they get their cash back. So the higher risk element of debt and financing and sourcing of financing in the market comes from other areas, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but it doesn't come from your traditional retail bank. Your traditional retail bank is a risk-averse organization, which will lend money when it's pretty certain it's going to get it back. It doesn't always get it back, obviously, but it sometimes surprises people when I say that. They are banks at retail level are not in the risk business. Let me just go back into sharing screen with you on this one. So repayment capacity is the measure of the business's ability to service its debt. And the bank will want to see how much operating cash flow are you generating within your business, which is then available to service debt repayments. And that capacity is assessed by determining something called EBITDA, which is an acronym for your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Now, again, what I say to you is don't be worrying about these expressions if you're not coming from a financial background. All small businesses or SMEs will have, I presume, somebody working with them internally or externally who's financially up to speed. So whether it's your external accountant or an internal financial manager, they'll be conscious of what's required here. But the key piece is, before the bank lends you money, they need to be comfortable they can get it back. And within that context, cash is king. Cash is the lifeblood of any business looking to grow. And sometimes, and it's quite unfortunate, you'll find businesses that are profitable and on the outside looking in, they look quite successful, but they'll actually run out of cash because they don't have a strong cash management structure within the organization. And a successful or profitable business can fold if it doesn't have good cash management structures. So, and it's important to recognize that profit and cash are different things, and they shouldn't ever be confused. So your profit and loss may be showing good activity on sales, and you may be reporting profit, all of which is legitimate. But remember, for you to have generated sales in the first place, you've had to do so from your cash flow. When you generate sales, you've incurred a cost to do that within your business. And you don't get paid for any sales that you've made until your debtors put money into your bank account. And depending on your cash reserves, if your debtors are slow to pay you, you could run into a cash flow problem. So again, in the context of developing your business and managing it, you need somebody in the business who's worrying constantly about getting money in. How do we get money in from our debtors? How do we manage our invoice book? And that's really important that you don't take your eye off that, because you can be building sales and building sales. But let's say, for argument's sake, let's take an example. You're creating a lot of sales. You've got 30-day invoice terms, and 80% of your clients are not paying you within the invoice terms. If those invoice terms go out to 40 days, 50 days, 90 days, your business is now under cash pressure. So it's really important to recognize that if you are invoicing with a 30-day structure, for instance, you have a mechanism that allows you to start contacting those clients at day 31 or day 32 if you haven't seen your invoice being paid. You've incurred cost to get that out into the marketplace. So if you produce something and sell it to me and I receive it, I'm consuming something that your company has invested money in producing. If I don't pay you on time, your company is in danger of starting to lose money on that sale. So you must have an internal structure that's tight that people understand and that your client base understands is going to be contacting them if they're not paying on time. And if you have clients, by the way, who are in the habit of not paying you on time, and you have to spend a lot of your time and resources getting money in from them, you have to ask yourself, is this a client that I want to retain into the future? Because there comes a point when if people are not paying you on time, it may not be worth doing business with them at all. They're difficult decisions to make, particularly when you're trying to develop a business and you're happy that you're generating sales, but there's no point in generating sales if you're not getting paid. What do banks really want? Above everything else, they want their money back. The banking industry is in a very strange scenario. If I was to ask you, can you think of any other business where you sell something to a client and then you spend the next 3, 5, 15 or 20 years trying to get it back? Your answer, I suspect, will be no. The banking industry is unique in that they sell you something, which is money. It's a raw material for your business, if you think of it like that. The banking industry is selling you that raw material. But as soon as they sell it to you, they start worrying about getting it back from you. That makes the industry fairly unique. So you need to understand and recognize they will be heavily focused on making sure they get their money back. As a small business owner, the bank is lending to you, and therefore you're the single most important variable in the process. You are the one that they are lending to. You're the one they have line of sight on. You're the most important variable. Of course, your business idea and your plan are vital, but they might be secondary to the quality of you as the business owner. And the reason I'd say that is, and from my experience, a poor business idea in the hands of an astute business owner may well have a better chance of success than a good business idea in the hands of a poor business owner. So if you think about it logically, you can give a good business idea to somebody who's not a good business person, and it may not work. You can give a relatively poor or a not well thought through business idea to an astute business owner, and they can turn it into something that will work. And of course, finally, the bank will also want to talk to you very likely about what security or collateral they can take for any funds that they may provide to you, which can often be a source of some tension between banks and clients. But if the bank are lending money on to you and they can't, they will look for a way of securing that debt, ideally within your company against some assets. But if not, they may look for personal guarantees from you in that process. Right, so let me talk briefly about other funding and support options coming off the banking structure. And I'll just come off the screen for this. So you've got crowdfunding platforms, and crowdfunding platforms have really developed a lot in the last 10 years. Very simply, a platform that you can go onto as a business owner. You make your pitch online around how much it is you're trying to raise and what you're trying to do with the money. And lots of different individuals who are on that platform can see your business idea and will make an individual decision of whether they want to lend to you or not. These have really taken off in the last 10, 15 years as an alternative source of funding, in particular for small business ideas, and in particular for small business ideas where the bank doesn't feel it can lend because they think the risk is too high, or because they can't get agreement with the owner on potential security. You can go onto these crowdfunding platforms and access funds from the general market, from people who like the look of your idea. And where this is working, I think, particularly strongly is in areas like local communities. So the local butcher decides they want to borrow €15,000, and they put their idea onto the crowdfunding platform. And the people locally who use that butcher as his customer actually have a chance to go onto the platform and support him in making some small amounts of money available in totally up to his 15,000 requirement. You could have 100 people, 200 people making that money available to reach the requirement that he or she has. So crowdfunding has proved particularly, I think, helpful for the building of community businesses within their own local communities. The other two below that were business angels and venture capital. Now, business angels are people who, usually individuals or small groups of individuals who have probably made some money in business in the past and are happy to invest in developing businesses. And they'll typically invest something from 50 to 250,000 euro. They'll normally want to be active in the business, which can be good news because you get a business angel investing in the business, and they bring some value add in terms of their expertise as well. So very often, small, medium enterprises are now funded and supported through business angel structures. But you do need to recognize, obviously, if somebody is putting 250,000 euro into your business, they will likely want to be involved. And of course, they may want to take some element of ownership in the business, or they'll certainly want to understand how they're going to be able to exit the business. Now, in both Ireland and Portugal, you have business angel networks that are quite active. In Ireland, they've been very active over a number of years, and I know likewise in Portugal. And I think in Portugal recently, you had a coming together of some businesses in the business angel area. You had APBA and FNABA, which were two business angel networks, and they've combined to become Investors Portugal. So again, if you're trying to access business angels, they are available to you. You can find them online, and a lot of it is involving conversations with people that you feel you can do business with going forward, and whose values match your own, and therefore you may source in that way investors into your business. Coming up slightly higher in the food chain, you've got venture capitalists, and again, you'll be familiar with these. They're usually companies. They usually have quite a lot of money available to invest in developing businesses. They tend to be in the 500,000 plus bracket up to multiple millions. They will be forensic in their examination of your business before they'll put money in. So you need to be at a certain stage where you're capable of letting these people in and opening your books and being comfortable that everything is going to stand up to a lot of scrutiny. But they will arrive with plenty of cash as required. They will also bring expertise. They'll want to put somebody on your board. They'll want to work fairly closely with you, and you need to be able to allow for that and be prepared for that to happen if you're taking in venture capital. They'll also look for an exit mechanism probably within a 5-year period. So they'll come in, they'll take a percentage of the business, and they'll look to sell out in 5 years' time, and obviously take a healthy profit with them for the intervening period. So it's not for everybody, but if your business is at a certain stage, the concept of business angels or venture capitalists may be something that you wish to consider by facilitating external funding into your business. And then finally on that one, where government grants. And again, in both countries, both Ireland and Portugal, you have available support mechanisms from government to help you develop and grow the business. In grant aid in Ireland, Enterprise Ireland, the local enterprise offices are hugely active in the space in supporting companies, particularly internationally traded companies. In Portugal, I know you have the IAPMEI, which is a government body, Turismo de Portugal, another government body, supporting the development of companies looking to expand into international markets and in the home market from a tourism perspective. There is and are lots of opportunities available to you by way of state and government aid. And again, you need to be prepared to put in some legwork. You need to be prepared to go and have a chat with these people, but they are there, they are trying to help, and the funds are available. But again, they will put you through the structure to make sure that it makes sense for the government to invest in your business. So let me summarize just around the financial piece before we move to the people. Get your head up on the business versus in the business. This is an interesting little comment, and really what I mean by it, as a small business owner, I understand how busy you are and how involved in the business you are. One of the things you have to try and do is come up out of the business sometimes to try and form a strategic view of what makes sense for the business, so that you're working less in the business and you're working more on it. You need to get your business plan into strong shape. You need to practice your pitch. You know, you need to practice making that pitch to potential investors, be they private or state. You should be prepared to release equity if it makes sense for you. A smaller ownership percentage of a successful venture is better than 100% of one going nowhere. So again, it's not easy to give up some of your business, but it's worth thinking about. You need to keep a tight rein on expenditure. You need to maintain good records, manage your debtor book forensically. Keep the line of communication open to your bank. The bank hates surprises. And then finally, I'd say turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is reality. That's back to the point, you must get cash in. And in that regard, a question has been asked around invoice discounting. What are my views on it? Should you sell your invoices to an invoice discounting company? I believe the answer to that is it depends. I'm not trying to fudge it, but it depends on the situation you're in. If you are a developing company generating lots of sales and you're having to give extended invoice terms of, for argument's sake, 60 or 90 days, as you sometimes will to new clients, you may want to consider the invoice discounting option. Because what invoice discounting does is they'll take your debtor book, let's say you have 100,000 in debtor book, they'll give you up to 70 or 80% of that book immediately. And they will then chase it down and call in, get the 100,000 in, and obviously charge you for the benefit of having given you the 70 or 80,000 up front. But what it does is it generates the cash earlier into your business than you having to wait for the invoice terms to reach their conclusion. So my answer is yes, absolutely worth considering. Be conscious of the price and have a look at the price versus you having to wait to get the money in at the end of 90 days. Because does that cost you more in your business? Sometimes people don't recognize the cost of having to wait 90 days to get paid, and they only see the cost of the invoice discounting up front. The invoice discounting cost may be less than your business having to run the cost of waiting to get paid. So my short answer is yes, have a look at it, give it consideration, and if it makes sense, go for it. Okay, I want to move into the people piece now, and what's involved in developing your people. And really, the opening comment I want to make is be prepared to spend time and money on recruitment and skill set development. Hiring the right person is vital to your business, and it's less costly than having to deal with a wrong fit individual down the road. I can't overstate this. I spend time working with organizations where they're having issues with personnel, people don't fit, and they just made the wrong decision when they were hiring. You've got to try and get that right. What's your internal developmental structure for supporting your team? Have you got a mentoring process? Have you got a coaching process? Are there continuing professional development opportunities? Have you got internal training programs, or can people sign up for external training programs? Soft skills development is essential in the key areas of influencing, negotiation, assertiveness behavior, communications, and there's others. And set your people up to win. Hire good people, give them clear goals, support them, and then get out of their way. And I'll talk a little bit about getting out of their way a little bit later. One of the things worth doing is a skills gap analysis and a training needs analysis within your business. So if you're looking to develop your business forward, you need to look at the skill set you have within the company right now, and then identify what additional skills might we need to source to support our development plan. And have we got those skills internally, or do we need to go to the market? And a trainer needs analysis is something you need to do before you commission training programs inside or outside your organization. So look at who we have, what skill sets are we missing, and therefore what skill sets do we need to get in? And that's what a training needs analysis will allow you to do. And a clear plan for training and indeed recruitment should correspond to the identified business skill gaps that you're finding. And your training plan and your recruitment plan should be designed to close those out. So you've identified where we have a gap. If it's internal, let's get a training setup done. If it's external, we need to recruit. But we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is closing out the gaps that we've identified. And that brings me to something called the skill will matrix that I just want to share with you. And as a business owner, this can sometimes be helpful to look at where do you plot your individual colleague and team members onto this quadrant. So you have the x-axis, which is skill levels, and you have the y-axis, which I'm calling will. And by will, I mean willingness to get involved. How much effort are they putting in? How supportive are they of the business? And if you have people who are highly skilled on the outside right of the x-axis and who are highly willing at the top end of the y-axis, you need to delegate to them. Let them get on with it. You don't need to micromanage them. You need to let them off. Give them the capacity to go and do the job because they are both skilled and willing. If you have people who are highly willing, but they're lowly skilled because they don't have the experience or they need more support, You need to guide them or mentor them, as the case might be, or coach them. If you have people who are low on skill and low on will, you need to direct them. They need direction. They need to be told what needs to happen. You need to point them in a certain direction because they're low on skill and they may be low on willingness to get stuck in. And on the other hand, you have somebody who may be very high on skill, but for whatever reason, the willingness level has dropped away. You may need to engage with them, need to re-excite them, re-energize them, particularly if they have a high skill set that's useful for you within the business. It's just a little guide that's sometimes worth considering where you plot your individual colleague team members in the context of how much time you're going to give over to engage with them as the business owner. Now, the other thing about training that's good news is a lot of this can be self-directed learning. It doesn't involve you having to go to the market. It doesn't involve you having to spend a lot of money. 70% of upskilling can be on-the-job experience. So if I take Bernadette on this call as an example, if I'm working with Bernadette and she has a particular skill set that I need to be upgraded on, I can be put sitting with Bernadette for a period of time. Let me see how she does it. Let me understand the skill set. Let me get upgraded in my skill by understanding how Bernadette goes about her business. 20% can be conversations with experts that can be inside your company or outside. And that's where things like networks such as this can be helpful. You can access people with levels of expertise without it having to cost you money. And then 10% can be formal training, which obviously may involve a cost and usually will. But the good news is that's only 10%. And the other 90 can be delivered without having to necessarily expend cash or expend cost. I'm just including a very quick personal development plan by way of saying it's not your job as the business owner to be responsible for everybody's career development. People have to be responsible for their own. So I'd encourage people to have their own personal development plan. And here's an example or a sample of one where people are identifying for themselves, what area do I want to develop in? How will I achieve that? What's happening now? And what do I need to do to make myself better in the area that I've identified for development? And of course, if I do that individually, and then I go to you as the business owner, as my manager, how can you support me? But the starting point is that each individual understands they're responsible primarily for their own development. That's not your responsibility. What is your responsibility, though, as a business owner or as a manager, is to create accountability within the structure. And I'm just popping up a quick slide to walk through what's involved in that. I think we need to create common purpose. So discuss the importance of what we're doing with the team. It's really the connection to why. Why does this matter? Why is this the way we do things around here? And if I come in as a new employee, it's helpful for me to understand that coming from you as the business owner, as my manager. Help me to understand why we do what we do. You need to give me clear expectations. You know, what are you looking for from me? What does success look like? If I'm going to be successful in this role, what will that look like in 6 months' time? We need communication and alignment. Communicate how we're going to achieve it. So if this is what success looks like in 6 months, how are we going to get there? And again, if I'm working on your team or working with you or for you, how are you going to help me to do that? We need collaboration, of course, across the team. We need coaching, we need monitoring, we need mentoring. And we need to be asking questions like, are we on track? And if we're not, what adjustments do we need to make? And then finally, we need to understand the consequences of the effort that's gone in. Here's the results that we got. This is what worked well. This is what perhaps didn't work well. What do we need to take from that by way of learning as we go forward? And if this is the job of everybody to have their own personal development plan, this is the job of owners and management to create that accountability platform within the organization. And part of that is setting SMART goals. You'll probably be familiar with this concept of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So if you are setting goals for me, it's a good idea to try and make sure that any goal you're handing across to me stands up under the SMART mnemonic. Is it a specific goal? Does it tell me who, what, where, when, and why? Is it measurable? How will we demonstrate and evaluate the extent to which this goal has been met? Is it achievable? There's no point in setting a goal for me that I feel from the outset I can't achieve. Is it relevant? How does it tie into my key responsibilities? And of course, is it time bound? Have I got to deliver within this quarter, within this year, whatever it might be? But making sure that as you're asking people to take on goals, that they stand up to some scrutiny and they're smart is something worthwhile doing. And then, of course, ongoing conversations in the coaching space. I like this quote that the health of a relationship, team or organization is a function of the average time lag between identifying and discussing problems. The better small, medium businesses and larger businesses in this space are the ones that address issues as they arise. They don't let them fester. They don't let the conversation get put off. They have it quickly. And I think it looks a little bit like this. This is what I was expecting. This is what I observed. And therefore, we have a gap in between. And I need to then have a conversation about the gap. And how do we close out that gap as we go forward? How do we make sure that we are getting the best possible performance on an ongoing basis? And I think the key thing is that this conversation needs to happen at the same time as we're seeing the gap, not 3 months later or at the end of the year or whenever you do your performance reviews. Let's have the gap conversation ongoing, hence the idea of ongoing conversations being tied in to the concept of coaching. But I want to look quickly at facilitation because, again, one of your roles as a business manager or owner is you're involved and engaged heavily in meetings, be it training, team meetings, business meetings, team building sessions. And facilitating those is important and putting the time into getting them right. And ideally what you're doing is a 5-point plan. You're designing what you want to do. So you've got in your own head, what do I want to do with this time that I'm investing in the team planning session? You're planning what that looks like then. When are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And then you're actually guiding people through the process. You're the owner of it and you're guiding them through it. You're controlling what's happening within that process. And of course, you're arranging and making sure that we have follow through. If we don't have follow through, we've wasted our time. You look at the effort that goes into team meetings. We need some degree of follow through to make sure that we're delivering on what we've signed up to. And there's just 5 P's in this space that I think are worth mentioning. Purpose, why are we having this session? And let's all understand why. What do we need to have when this session is done? What do we want in our hands when this session is over? What do I want in my head in terms of what do you want them to know? And what do you want people to have in their heart? What do you want them to believe? So I think these are important elements of setting up the session around what needs to happen. That's 3 of the 5 P's. And the other 2 are the participants, who will be attending and what are their attitudes when they arrive and what issues are we trying to address. So again, as part of your role as an owner, manager, or facilitator, it's just trying to make sure that these issues are on the table and covered out as we move forward. And finally, the process. What steps will get us to wherever it is we might be trying to get to? By the way, I appreciate I'm going through this reasonably quickly. The slide deck is available to anybody who may want it afterwards. And if you have any queries on it subsequent to that, you can pop me an email. Now, so in wrapping up, what's required of a facilitator? You need to inform your audience. You need to involve your audience. You need to empower them, and you need to excite them. Now, excite is a big word, so I think engage them. But if we're informing people, and you think about this within your own team, if you've got a team of 8 people, keeping them informed, having them feel involved, having them feel empowered to input, make changes, suggest changes, whatever it might be, and be excited about what we're trying to do is part and parcel of the role of the facilitator. I quickly want to move on to looking at influencers, and this is a mnemonic. You can see we've just spelled out influencer here in terms of what they do. They're very good at indicating the benefits of their ideas. They're good communicators around explaining to people why the idea makes sense. They also have a capacity to neutralize resistance, and preferably in advance. So if you're going into your team or into a client trying to influence, if you are able to preempt where the resistance might be, you may be able to deal with some of that resistance in advance, and therefore it doesn't become a blocker in the process itself. They find different ways to influence people. You know, they're creative in that space. They listen attentively. They're always good listeners, and they're hearing what's coming at them. They have the ability to uncover needs and wants. So the capacity to find out what is it somebody is really looking for. They're good at empathizing and letting the customer or the client or the colleague understand that they are interested in what's going on from their perspective. They are good at seeing how people respond, body language, what's coming across the table at me, what do I need to be conscious of here? They're good at creating and maintaining rapport. They build rapport with clients within teams. They eliminate weak statements in their language, which is another interesting one. They don't tend to be watery about what they're saying. They tend to be more definitive. And the more definitive you are, the more confident other people are likely to be as they listen to what you're putting forward. And they prepare by rehearsing. They actually think beforehand, before they go into a meeting, how am I going to present this? What is it I'm going to say? And they put in the time around preparation. I want to close out with assertive behavior and negotiation quickly. And assertive behavior comes in three forms. There's four different options open to us behaviorally. Are we being assertive? Are we being passive? Are we being aggressive? Or are we being passive aggressive? And the ideal one is that we are trying to be assertive in the top right, where my rights count, but so do yours. And we get what's known as the win-win. Now, the world is not full of assertive people, and many people might see themselves as being more passive. And in that case, there's a tendency for you to think that the other individual's rights don't count, but mine don't. And you potentially get lose-win. And with people who are aggressive, my rights count, yours don't, and that becomes win-lose. And of course, passive-aggressive is just lose-lose. There's no real outcome from that. But what I would say is, people who may have a tendency towards aggressive styles need to be very conscious of it and try to manage it. If you have a passive style, it's not, in my view, an issue. It's about recognizing, when do I need to dial that style up? When do I need to become more assertive? And how do I do that? And some of the ways in which we do that are recognizing what's important in assertive behavior. I need to be able to state my needs in an honest way. I need to be clear and direct in what I'm saying. And I need to stand up for my rights without violating the rights of other people. So there are three things that, if you're trying to be assertive, are useful to think about. Am I stating my needs openly and honestly? Am I being clear and direct in what I'm saying? And in standing up for my rights, am I making sure I'm not violating the rights of anybody else? You can see we have a balanced scale here for assertive behavior. You take rights for yourself and you give rights to others, but you do so in a balanced fashion. And I think the bottom piece is probably important in that regard. You recognize that you have needs and you have rights, but so has the other party, but you both have something to contribute. And I think that's important in the context of assertive behavior. And then in assertive communication, it's that whole thing again, recognizing people's rights, needs, and responsibilities. We should be courteous and polite. We need to listen to understand, ask open questions, because when you're asking open questions, you're looking for information, you're expressing interest. Reflect back on what we hear, both facts and feelings, because that's really displaying empathy. Be clear and specific in what's being said, and remain focused in the process. And then finally, around assertive behavior, just to recognize your attitude will determine your behavior, but we are and choose and control our own behavior. Nobody else is responsible for your behavior except you. And your behavior will influence other people's behavior, and it will either hinder or help the way in which you communicate. And of course, your behavior is directly observable by other people, and it influences the way other people engage with you. So trying to arrive at assertive behavior that takes account of both your needs and the needs on the other side of the conversation is important. And finally, I want to wrap up with negotiations and what I call some negotiation non-negotiables. If you're going into negotiations, you need to prepare. You need to be crystal clear on what your objective is. You need to think about some of the assumptions you might make, because we all make assumptions on the way into negotiations. We all have conscious and unconscious bias that has us behaving in a certain way. You need to know your objectives, your BATA and your WAP, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If I can't get my core objective, what's the best alternative? And your WAP is your walkaway point. At what point in this negotiation might we decide we're walking away because we're wasting our time? Flexibility is essential, because hard positions produce hard outcomes. And we need to try and stay calm and leave the negative emotions at the door and bring in the good emotions, which are optimism, empathy, concern. You need to challenge bad behavior if you're getting it in the process. And of course, if you can, try and keep your sense of perspective and your sense of humor, because they'll carry you a long way in any negotiation process. And finally, I just want to look at the Thomas Kilmann conflict model, or indeed negotiation model, which looks at how we might behave in negotiation based on how cooperative we're prepared to be or how assertive we're prepared to be. And on the x-axis, again, you have cooperation ranging from being uncooperative to being very cooperative. And on the y-axis, assertion ranging from being unassertive to being assertive. And ideally where you want to be is in the top right box, where you're being highly cooperative and highly assertive. And that's likely to get you a win-win outcome. Now, you may decide also that you're in the bottom right-hand box, where I'm going to be more cooperative and less assertive. And that's maybe where you might be trying to build a relationship. You may be prepared to give something away at this point in time because it's important to build a relationship with the client. And therefore, you may be more accommodating. On the other hand, if you're in the top left, you've gone in to get the result and you're not worried about being cooperative. You're just looking for a result and you're being assertive in getting it. Again, that's your prerogative. But you need to recognize if you're in the top left-hand box and you're constantly competing, you're probably damaging the relationship at the same time. And of course, ideally, we'll find ourselves being prepared to get into the red box and compromise as required in an effort to find the middle ground that works for all parties. And then I just want to summarize on the people piece to say, create the right environment. You need to model the behaviors you want to see from your own team. So are your own team seeing these behaviors from you? You need to give people the opportunity for personal growth within the business. And they will reward you with discretionary effort if you do that. You need to spend time on selection and internal promotions. It's vital to make sure you're bringing in the right people to your business and promoting the right people within your business. And set up the team for success. If you're clear on what you expect, if you provide support as needed to your team, if you're listening to what they're saying to you by way of feedback, and you're not forgetting to be human, you're building a team that's likely to work well with you and give you that discretionary effort that you're looking for. And then, of course, you need to get out of their way, which means that we don't micromanage, let them get on with it. If they've been given clear expectations and guidelines and they know you're available to support as needed, they'll get on with the job and they'll do it without you having to oversee it. Okay, so that takes us through to 1050. I know we went through that quite quickly. I hope I was able to explain the points in going through it with you, albeit it was quick. I'm happy now to take any questions, comments, thoughts, inputs that you want to share or ask of me.
Yes, thank you very much, Gerry. Yeah, okay, my connection is not so good. So please, if anybody has any question, I think there is a comment from Anthony. Gerry?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. The key to success is cross-team selection on a multi-level, so that all strata of the organization are dealt with. Identifying an influencer at junior team level is sometimes just as important as the senior team. Absolutely, 100% Anthony, agree. Your influencers don't have to be your senior leaders in the team or in the organization. They can be juniors, they can be people who are only in the place a couple of weeks, and they can be influencing by way of the behavior they're bringing to the organization. So I couldn't agree more. That influencing structure should be right across the organization at all levels.
One other thing that you mentioned that I thought I could add one thing about influencers is that they tend to be consistent. So consistency is just as important. So you said about preparation, but from my experience of running teams, sometimes the most powerful influencers are ones that are unwavering in their belief, and they are listened to simply by being dogged and just constantly going for the same thing. And they might not be prepared at every meeting, but they know what they're talking about. And also because of that, they are de facto prepared because they've got this inherent belief about what to do, and people will follow that if they agree with it. So that consistency is probably more influential than many things that we can see now in politics, right? But if you're consistent, then people will tend to believe you.
Again, I think it's a really well made point, and you're spot on in the sense that if I'm consistent in the way I behave, and more importantly, if my value levels are consistent, because my behavior will flow from that, I don't need to be doing preparation on a constant basis because I'm delivering against my consistent values and people can see that. So I agree.
Correct. And that flows through everything, right? Through negotiation, team leadership, team playing, whatever. Consistency is vital.
Absolutely. There's something known as the say-do gap that you're possibly familiar with, and I think the key issue being that if I'm a leader in the organization in particular, that I'm seen to be doing what I'm saying. So the say-do gap should be very narrow, and the wider the say-do gap in organizations where the senior leadership team are saying one thing but seem to be doing something different, is where you get unease in organizations, because you've got people not delivering against the values that they are espousing.
That's right.
Revolut have started offering loans. Other digital banks will follow. Any thoughts on this trend? Yeah, Shane, I'm a major fan of Revolut. As a parent to 3 adult children, it's one way that they extract money from me on a regular basis. So I understand the process around Revolut. As I say though, as a former retail banker, I think they're brilliant. You know what they do exceptionally well. The transfer of money options in different currencies, etc., is exceptionally well done. They have only started, I think, offering loans relatively recently, Shane. So I'm not trying to flip the question, but I just don't have any experience on it, and I haven't heard any feedback from anybody who's got a loan from them. I would say if they're delivering their loan process in the same expert fashion that they've delivered their transmission, money transmission process, I suspect it'll be a winner, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question, and I hope you can hear me. It's about hiring the right people, because I found it quite a challenge when you are hiring a new team, that sometimes you interview the person and it happens to be not the person that you thought was going to be in the job. So how do you make that process to minimize that risk?
A couple of thoughts, Arnold. I think sometimes what happens, and I think we've all been there, you look to recruit and you don't quite get to what you're looking for, but you take somebody anyway, because you're under pressure, or we need to get a body in. In my experience, you're better off not doing that. You're better off taking the pain for a bit longer of having a gap until you source the individual that is absolutely the right fit for your organization. So you go back to Anthony's input there. The most junior person in your organization can have an influence on what's going on through their behavior, and that can be positive or negative. I think it's just so important that we get the right people in, and if we have to spend more time rather than take the hire that's on front of us because we're under pressure, that's the right thing to do. The other right thing to do, in my experience, is if you have a 6-month probationary period or whatever structure you have in your organization, exercise it at the end of the 6 months to exit somebody if you're not 100% certain they're the right fit. I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, and at a human level, people sometimes find it hard. But if somebody is indicating to you over a 6-month period that they may not be the right choice for you and you're not certain about them, in my view, you should exercise the option to exit.
Yeah.
Picking up on what, sorry to jump in again, but picking up what Gerry said earlier about action points and having real actionable steps in terms of objectives. That's a really good way of onboarding people as well, because if you do have clear objectives defined, it's almost like having clauses in a contract. And after that 6-month period, if the actionable steps have not been delivered, then it's a much easier conversation to have, because it's clear that they're not the right person for that particular task. And you might find another role for them in the organization if you're a growing organization, but you've also got the right to say, you know what, it's not going to work out. Yeah. And that's why doing that both on exit and entry is really important, because you can also really learn and listen from the feedback, because they might be in the right person on day one, but by the 6 months' time, the organization might have changed so much if you're a fast-growing business that they just have been left behind, they can't keep with the pace, whatever, and they might be better in a slower-based business. So it's that feedback that you get that makes you think about your next hire.
Yeah, again, a really good point. The more clear we can be on day one and the more specific around what we're looking for, the fairer we are to everybody then at the end of the probationary period as to whether they've actually met those requirements or not. There is an onus and a responsibility on us, Arnold, to make sure that we have provided that clarity at the outset and we haven't set somebody off in the wrong direction.
I love the idea, Gerry, about the 70% experience learning on the job. especially for younger people with no work experience as such, well-educated young people. I think they've an awful lot to bring to the table, and they can teach us older people quite a lot of things, granted not about management. But if you look at management theories, I think there's 7 or 8. I have a bit of brain fog, so I don't know exactly the right number. But if you go back to when they were created, those theories are still in place, roughly. But work has changed, people have changed. And so that's why I like that, the way you say about 70% of that upskilling, or just taking on new people and giving them this opportunity, and allow that management style to also change, because those that developed those techniques or methodologies, if they were alive today, they could function in any industry, because it hasn't really changed, but work has.
Yeah, really, really good point, Bernadette, and you're spot on. And in my day, many years ago, it used to be called sitting by Nelly. And the idea being is that you were sitting side by side with somebody who was more experienced, more skilled than you were, and you learned by osmosis, by watching what they were doing and listening to what they were doing, etc. Yeah. And it's a really good way of trying to bring people into an organization. I think organizations, irrespective of their size, should have some smaller, significant mentoring structure that they're able to tap into. So if I arrive new into your business, I know who's going to be paired with me to keep an eye on me for the first few months and help me through the process. It also helps people to understand the way we do things around here. So you become part of the culture a little bit faster. So from Beatrice, I don't always find it easy to make clients conscientious of how the law can be of help. Often they take it more as an inconvenience, too worried about the wraparound. How should lawyers show their value from the beginning without seeming to be cumbersome? Thank you, Beatrice, for the question. I have some sympathy with, I think, the way, if I'm hearing you right, the way you've expressed that, you're probably sometimes seen as an interference almost in the business from a legal perspective than a support. And in terms of how do you show your value from the outset, I guess if I think about lawyers I've dealt with over the years, you show your value by trying to help the business owner to understand precisely what it is you're bringing to the party on their behalf. I mean, my internal lawyers in the banking world when I was there used to say that their job was to keep us out of jail. So they, to make sure we were doing everything we needed to do in the right way. And your job maybe as a lawyer is to stop a business overstretching. It's to stop it doing something that could be borderline illegal. It's to be aware of its requirements environmentally, for instance, all those type of things. So I think you just have to try and draw a picture for the business owner of how and where you add value, and nobody will know that better than you will, but to try and get the owner to sit down and give you the opportunity to explain that as part of a meeting with them as you're trying to pitch for business, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. It's just sometimes I work a lot with small and medium enterprises that are just beginning or in a growth path, and I feel like they come with like a rapid question or something to do like really quickly, and then you can, as a lawyer, because you know things and you work with all kinds of companies, you can understand what the path is going through, and you try to warn them that you should do also this and think about this, and they just go on with their, and then they come back saying, oh, you want remember you told me about this, now it happened, and now we are kind of worried about it. And it's just like, I would better prefer that we could plan everything, but I understand it's not a priority, but then it feels like people could be aware from the beginning, and it's hard to pass the message.
Well, as you say, I guess it's very hard for small businesses to plan in that way because things hit them and things happen that they may not have seen coming. I think the other part of the problem might be that you're seen as an overhead or a cost. You need to try and show them what the benefit of that cost is.
For sure, thank you.
Okay. If there is no more question or comment, anything? Okay. Well, I will be sharing the contact details of Gerry. Gerry, you're on LinkedIn. but I will share your email address as well. And I will share the presentation as well. Okay.
Perfect.
No problem. So thanks, Arna, and thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us. It was a pleasure to be with you. Good luck going forward in your business.
Thank you, Gerry.
Yeah.
And we'll have the chance to meet each other again in presence. Just keep visiting our website. You will see we have our meet member where we can all meet together. We'll be in Dublin in June on the 30th. That's the provisional date, but that will be confirmed very soon, and hope to see you all there then. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. All the best, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're frozen again, Arnold, I think, are you?